Hey everybody, it's Ron, and I want to tell you a story about business and how that story changed everything. It's a summer afternoon sometime in the mid-1950s, and you're looking out at a patch of grass behind a small wooden house. There's a wooden fence and a few boys in rolled-up jeans and dusty sneakers dividing themselves into teams. You're the sheriff. Fine, then I'm the outlaw. Finger guns come out. Dramatic squints, someone dives behind a tree. I've got a Colt 45, one of them shouts. Now, he doesn't know what a 45 is. He doesn't know about manufacturing tolerances or military contracts. He's heard the name on the radio, seen it in comic books, maybe watched it on television. But he knows the brand. He knows it carries weight. By the 1950s, the word Colt had become shorthand for frontier toughness and lawmen and outlaws. It had moved from factory floor to folklore, and that kind of brand saturation does not happen by accident. It takes production systems and distribution networks. It takes aggressive salesmanship and government contracts. So how does a 19th century factory owner build a name that echoes a century later in suburban backyards? What does it take to turn a mechanical device into a cultural shorthand? And how did it begin with a boy born on March 10th, 1814? From Business Basics, I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the daily podcast where we explain stories that changed business forever. Every date on the calendar has a story where business reshaped the world. Today, March 10th, that story takes us to 1814, the birth of a brand that traveled the world. Samuel Colt was not born into industrial dominance. As a teenager, he was already tinkering with mechanical ideas, though. While working aboard a ship, he became fascinated with rotating mechanisms, how one chamber could turn into the next in sequence. That motion would later inspire his revolver design, a rotating cylinder capable of firing multiple shots without having to reload. And in the 1830s, that idea felt almost futuristic. Now, Colt secured patents and opened a factory in Paterson, New Jersey. The ambition was large. Repeating firearms would change the way people thought about defense and combat. But invention didn't guarantee adoption. Military contracts were inconsistent and civilian buyers were cautious. Manufacturing, as we all know, was expensive and distribution networks at that time were weak. That means that cash flow was really tight. By the early 1840s, the Paterson factory collapsed, and that lesson was painful. A better mechanism does not automatically create a market. Production without demand is just kind of inventory. So Colt stepped back and reconsidered the problem. If customers didn't yet understand the value of a repeating firearm, he'd have to show them. He'd have to sell the idea before he could sell the product. Colt's revival came through persistence and public demonstrations. So much so that in the mid-1840s, members of the famed Texas Rangers began using Colt revolvers during engagements in Texas. The ability to fire multiple shots without reloading proved tactically useful, and that practical validation gave Colt something he had lacked before: credibility. He rebuilt his manufacturing operation in Hartford, Connecticut, and this time the approach was more systematic. Interchangeable parts were applied more consistently. Standardization improved reliability and repairs became easier. That meant that the output increased. But Colt didn't rely on factory efficiency alone. He courted military buyers aggressively. He pursued international contracts in Europe. He displayed his firearms prominently at exhibitions. His name was stamped clearly on his products, not hidden behind some kind of generic labeling. He treated branding as part of the manufacturing. A factory could produce revolvers, but salesmanship created markets. Mass production, he understood, required mass persuasion. By the time of the American Civil War, Colt's firearms were being supplied at large scale. Government contracts ensured the volume, and export agreements extended reach beyond the American borders. The Hartford factory became a visible symbol of American industrial capability. When Colt died in 1862, the company obviously didn't disappear. It continued producing revolvers that would later become associated with frontier expansion and American folklore. The brand traveled through wars and trade and catalogs and eventually film and radio and television. It entered popular imagination long after the founder was gone. That is how a name born in the 18th century workshop could echo into the 20th century backyards when children shouted Colt 45 without understanding what it meant. They weren't referencing a patent, they were repeating a brand name. On March 10, 1814, Samuel Colt was born, and what followed was not simply a mechanical invention. It was an early example of American industrial capitalism, production paired with marketing, manufacturing fused with distribution, and a name strong enough to outlive the man who built it. I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the podcast that finds the turning points behind the headlines. To hear more stories like this, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you're enjoying the stories, please do me a favor. Don't forget to subscribe and even leave a quick review. It helps more people find the story behind the business. And do you want to actually understand business without the fluff or the buzzwords or the MBA language? Start by visiting us at businessdailypodcast.com.